Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Kodani Jai Jaya Mayapur Chachi Jaya Kodani Jai Jaya Mayapur Chachi. Jaya Shri Tosina Jaya Shri Tosina Shri Tosina Jaya Shri Tosina. Jaya Giridhari La Jaya Giridhari La Giridhari La Jaya Giridhari La. Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Nrsimhadev. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Guru Parampara ki, Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaura Brahmanandi. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, the final lesson. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is, therefore, to be appreciated not only as the guru of a few intimate servants, or even the guru of a single generation of disciples. As the founder Acharya of the Krishna conscious movement, he introduced the standard of Krishna consciousness as it can be practiced by all sincere followers for thousands of years to come. The scriptures predict that although the present age is constantly becoming more inauspicious, unfortunate, and degraded, for a period of 10,000 years from the time of Lord Chaitanya's advent, a golden age of Krishna consciousness can appear, despite the force of Kali Yuga. Srila Prabhupada therefore prepared his translations and Bhaktivedanta purports on the essential Vaishnava scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, with the plan that they would form the foundation of the Krishna consciousness movement for 10,000 years. We cannot limit Srila Prabhupada, therefore, by describing him only within the drama of his being the Guru for one generation of followers. Srila Prabhupada is Jagat Guru, the spiritual master of the entire world. He is a bona fide spiritual master, faithfully conveying the message of the disciplic succession from Lord Krishna as he received it in parampara from his spiritual master. But more than that, he was empowered by Krishna to do what no other spiritual master has ever done. He is the founder Acharya for spreading Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan worldwide in the midst of the age of Kali. Srila Prabhupada ki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, The History of the Life of Ajamil. Text 18. Is it 18? Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Prayashchitani
Prayashchitani
Chirnani
Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana
Narayana
Paranmukam
Paramukam
Narayana Paranmukam
Narayana Paramukam
Na Nishpunanti
Vishpuranti
Rajendra
Rajendra
Na Nishpunanti Rajendra
Vishpuranti Rajendra
Sura
Sura
Kumbam
Kumbam
Ivapaga
Vipaka
Sura Kumbam Ivapaga
Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana Paranmukam
Narayana Paramukam
Nanishpunanti Rajendra
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Sura Kumbamivapaga
Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana Paranmukam
Narayana Paramukam
Nanishpunanti Rajendra
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Sura Kumbamivapaga
Sura Kumbam Vipaka Prayashchitani Chirnani Narayana Paramukam Nishpunanti Rajendra Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana Paramukam
Narayana Paramukam
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Sura Kumbam Ivapaga
Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana Paramukam
Narayana Paramukam
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Sura Kumbam Ivapaga
Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Vaishnavis.
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Prayashchitani Chirnani
Narayana Paramukam
Narayana Paramukam
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Nishpunanti Rajendra
Sura Kumbam Vipaka
Sura Kumbham Vivapagaha.
Prayashchittani,
Prayaschittani.
processes of atonement. Chirnani,
Jirnani.
very nicely performed. Narayana Paranmukam,
Narayana Paramukam.
a non-devotee. Na Nishpunanti,
Narishpunati.
cannot purify. Rajendra,
Rajendra.
O king. Sura Kumbham,
Sura Kumbham.
a pot containing liquor. Iva, like. Apaga,
Apaga.
the waters of the rivers. Translation. My dear king, as a pot containing liquor cannot be purified even if washed in the waters of many rivers, non-devotees cannot be purified by processes of atonement, even if they perform them very well. Please repeat. My dear king, as a pot containing liquor cannot be purified even if washed in the waters of many rivers, non-devotees cannot be purified by processes of atonement, even if they perform them very well. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Take advantage of the methods of atonement. One must be at least somewhat devoted. Otherwise, there is no chance of one's being purified. It is clear from this verse that even those who take advantage of karma kanda and jnana kanda, but are not at least slightly devoted, cannot be purified simply by following these other paths. The word prayoshchitani is plural in number to indicate both karma kanda and jnana kanda. Narottam Das Thakur therefore says, Karma kanda, jnana kanda, kevala vishera bandha. Thus Narottam Das Thakur compares the paths of karma kanda and jnana kanda to pots of poison. Liquor and poison are in the same category. According to this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, a person who has heard a good deal about the path of devotional service, but who is not attached to it, who is not Krishna conscious, is like a pot of liquor. Such a person cannot be purified without at least a slight touch of devotional service. Amagyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmanitamjana Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapatam Yana Bhutale Swayam Rupagadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Andeham Shri Guru Shri Yatapadakam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagojatam Sahaganam Raganatanvitam Sam Sajivam Advaitam Savadutam Parijna Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shiva Shukam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindadina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanu Sitadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Anshakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhavayevacha Haritanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, as far as my understanding stretches, this example of a pot which has contained liquor. Because liquor has an effect on the pot, which means that it just can't be cleaned so easily. It remains contaminated. Because the liquor actually contaminates the pot. It's not even after the water even after the liquor's been emptied out. It is the pot isn't cleaned just by water. So similarly, a person who still has a mentality of a fruitive mentality, a mentality of controllership and independence, desiring to remain independent, then that tendency cannot be removed simply by the process of karma-kanda or jnana-kanda. And even here, Srila Prabhupada says, even a person who has heard a good deal about the path of devotional service, but who is not attached to it, such a person also is not benefited really by that process of atonement. So, as long as someone maintains this desire to be the controller, then they don't allow the processes which have been given by Krishna and the devotees to purify them. They're not allowing that process to act. There's Srila Prabhupada in the Nectar of Instruction talks about how a doctor gives a diet and a medicine to cure a patient. So if the patient takes the medicine but doesn't follow the diet, then the medicine won't be able to act properly. So similarly, if someone practicing or following the Vedic injunctions, who is not willing to change their diet, and that because the diet is to remove the poison from the body to allow the medicine to act. So similarly, to really allow the process of devotional service to work, then we have to be willing to uproot the tendency to want to be the supreme controller, to be the enjoyer, to be in full knowledge, to be the complete knower, and not to be controlled by someone else. So this is the desire of the jnani. It's more easy to understand it in terms of the karma-kanda section, because the goal of the karma-kandis is to enjoy material sense gratification in the heavenly planets, or even in their next birth on this planet, to attain some kind of opulence, whether it's wealth or knowledge or respect or good family or beauty. Whereas the jnanis have understood that process is bound to bring frustration, and that the nature of the material world is that there'll always be some suffering. And so the jnanis are desiring to attain a level where there's no chance of suffering. And so it's called liberation, meaning freedom from all inconvenience, freedom from all being the victim. But it's still the Gyanis still have a desire to be the controller, whereas a devotee is desiring to be the instrument, is desiring to be the dependent, Krishna's dependent, desiring to be of service. So in that sense, there's that mentality allows the process to work. So that desire to be the controller, the enjoyer, and we perceive it when we're in the early stages of devotional service. We perceive it as some resistance. It was a resistance to follow the advice and instructions of the Shastra, of our spiritual teachers, of the Paramatma. And we perceive that resistance even in, once we start practicing karma yoga, bhakti yoga, then we're sometimes surprised that that there's so much resistance just to performing a simple task. Just like getting up early in the morning, or just like keeping ourselves very, very clean, or cleaning some part of the space that we're living in, or cleaning the temple. We're perhaps surprised that we perceive some reluctance and resistance to perform that activity. Whereas perhaps we see that non-devotees, are willing to sacrifice comfort and wealth and so many things to satisfy their material desires. But that apparent sacrifice that they're making is to remain the controller, to remain ahambogi, as it's described in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 16. Krishna characterizes that enjoying mentality, that I am, how is it, ahambogi? What's the actual verse? Such a person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifices. I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. So that may seem a long way from someone performing Jnana-kanda section of the Vedas, but in one sense, it's the same desire to always be in control, to be in an environment where we're not threatened by anything which can disturb us. So this is in that sense, the Mayavadi and the demoniac person are very similar, that they don't want to be in any way compromised in their situation. So similarly, when we're performing activities by which to increase our devotion to Krishna, then we may find some vestiges of this mentality arising to the surface and preventing our ability to take the mercy that's being given to us. That this is, we should consider we're very fortunate to be, even in the beginning stages of Bhakti Yoga, we should think I'm very fortunate to actually be shown this contamination so that I can apply the process more diligently and actually be able to accept the mercy. So just every morning here at Karuna Bhavan, we pray to Shishi Kodnatai Mai Poshashi, please make us worthy of your mercy. So it's a recognition that Lord Krishna's come in so many forms to bestow his mercy upon us. And our difficulty is that we're not an empty vessel to receive that mercy, or perhaps even if we're an empty vessel, we're a contaminated vessel that can't actually absorb the pure mercy that's coming. So that's my understanding of this example of the pot of poison. There are two other examples given in this chapter that we've already read about the potency of devotional service. Does anyone remember either of them? This was in 2 verses just previously. One is about the bamboo being burnt to the ground, but the roots still remaining potent and able to once again germinate under the ground. So this is compared also to the Jnana Kanda section of the Vedic process, that the Jnanis may be able to remove all of the results of their previous sinful activities by these processes of atonement, but they're not able to remove the root, and that root is this desire to be the controller. It's the desire to be always able to be free from victimization, you could say. And unfortunately, that also makes them unable to accept the mercy of Krishna, because they don't recognize it as being the supreme good fortune. So, devotees throughout history have recognized this difficulty in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, when the sages are approaching Suta Goswami, they start by describing the qualities of Kali Yuga. Prayanal payasa yasmin kalavismin yuge jana manda manda sumatayo manda bhagyu padrita. This Iron Age of Kali, men have short lives, they are lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. So then they say that there are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties which can be learned only after many years of study in their various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. So, we've all perhaps experienced that in trying to give up an unwanted habit or an undesirable tendency, we may come to the stage where we're no longer performing it, and that we think that we've actually overcome that habit. But then sometime in the future, when perhaps external circumstances change and we're put under more stress than usual, we may be surprised that that habit becomes manifest again. So this is because the heart is not actually satisfied. And this is the anxiety of the devotees, Their anxiety is that all of these different instructions in the different shastras, they can see that for some reason the hearts of the living beings are not satisfied by following the different rules and regulations of the Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda shastras. So they're asking Sutta Goswami, please select the essence and explain it for the good of all living beings. So then Sutta Goswami explains the Srimad Bhagavatam as he's heard it from Shukadev Goswami. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is all about devotional service to Krishna, especially hearing and chanting about Krishna. So by this process, the hearts of the living beings, our hearts will be fully satisfied, and our hearts will be constantly satisfied, so that even when external circumstances put a lot of pressure on our consciousness, then the heart will not be, the heart will no longer produce any inauspicious tendency. So the word here is fully satisfied. Srila Prabhupada also uses the word saturated, that the heart must be saturated, especially when Srila Prabhupada quotes the verse, Premanjana Chariti Bhakti Velochanena Sandasadai Faridayeshu Velokayanti Yang Shyama Sundaram Achintagana Swarupam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. That when the heart is suffused with prema, then there's no possibility of any contamination. So that, yes, saturated means there's no possibility of anything else entering in. But for saturation to be there, just like here we're living on a hill which is quite often saturated with water, but we're fortunate that it's a hill because it runs away. And actually anywhere, really, saturation, there'll always be somewhere for the water to flow out wherever you are. And that's also the case in our consciousness, that saturation can only be achieved when there's a constant supply, a constant flow. And it's a dynamic thing. And Srimati Kuntadevi, she prays to Krishna that our hearts can be over-flooded with attraction to him. It's a very, very famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, verse 42. Tvai me nanya vishaya mati madhupate sakrit ratim udvahatad ada gange vogam udanvati. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn into you without being diverted to anyone else. And in the word for word, asakrit means continuously, ratim, attraction, and udvahatat, may overflow. So also the Christians have this expression, my cup is overflowing. And as far as I understand, that refers to being overflowing with the mercy of God. So this is what we're aspiring for. And there are many prayers which help us focus on this task that we have before us. And it's a nice kind of metaphor to meditate on, because it allows us to see all difficult challenges as being therapeutic procedures for allowing our heart to be a vessel for this like overflowing attraction. Shall I stop there? Are there any questions or comments?
Thanks for the possible. You see, like you mentioned prayer to make things worthy of your message. Just to what extent can you, because everything's up to Krishna, so there's nothing you can do but pray, but at the same time, how much do you have to take your own, I don't know, make your own endeavour to become worthy of the mercy, rather than just rely on prayer? Or is it,
Yeah, well, the process of becoming worthy has been given to us by our acharyas, especially Srila Rupa Goswami and the Nectar of Devotion, because these acharyas were praying, and also Lord Chaitanya specifically empowered Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami to write books about the process of purification, of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada took those books and put them into practice in the daily life of the ISKCON temples, especially in the morning program. So, although we only say it once a day, really we could be meditating on that instruction at many times throughout the day. And so we could, when we're chanting our japa, we could be, please make us worthy of this mercy. But you only really pray. You can only really pray sincerely when you're experiencing some helplessness or frustration. And you can only experience like very deep helplessness and frustration when you're making a deep endeavor to do what you understand to be the correct process at that time. Yeah. So okay. I mean, it's not just in the japa period. It's in every aspect of our service throughout the day, and whether we're in the temple or whether we're working outside the temple. One of the goals is to remember that we are the eternal servants of Krishna, and that if we can act in that role or that mode as being the servants, then we want to become a servant who's always on call. So in that sense, yeah, your question was, what do we have to do to become worthy? Do we just have to pray? Well, we have to do our very best as far as we can understand to be a humble servant, always ready to be engaged by those devotees who are empowered to direct us in some way. So that's our choice. We can choose who we want to accept as our authorities. Then we have many Shiksha Gurus, we have many instructing spiritual masters who we see are qualified to pass on the teachings of the previous acharyas to us personally. And then the Shastras recommend that we choose one such teacher to become our Diksha Guru. The process of Diksha is compared, or of initiation is compared to transforming a pot of bell metal into a pot of gold. So it's, in one sense, it's quite similar to this example, although bell metal is not poison or not liquor, but still bell metal is an alloy, it's not a pure metal. So this process of approaching a spiritual master and accepting initiation means I acknowledge that I have an alloyed heart, you could say, or that my consciousness is polluted with many different elements which make it impossible for me to surrender to Krishna fully. So therefore I accept the process of purification by which I want to become pure. So that's the process, but part of the process is prayer. Part of the process is prayer. And sometimes the prayers will come from time to time when we're really feeling like we want to make a step forward and we're really pushing and really trying to follow everything very, very strictly. Sometimes the prayer will come then because it's going very deep. And it's like our activities and our determination to follow are actually like bringing the impurities up to the surface. And then we'll pray to like have them removed. But at other times that won't be there. Perhaps we're not able to follow, we're not able to practice to that degree of intensity at all times because we have other responsibilities at present in our lives. So for that reason, then we also recite the prayers of the previous acharyas. So this is mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, that we should recite heartfelt prayers, our own heartfelt prayers, and we should also recite prayers of the previous acharyas. For example, we have the Shikshastra prayers of Lord Chaitanya, many of which are like asking for purification. And the songs of, well, here this Narottam Das Thakur's song is quoted in this verse. And there are so many songs by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Brahma Sanghita prayers. So these prayers of previous acharyas, these help us meditate on our condition, meditate on the philosophy, meditate on the tattva of our condition, while simultaneously developing the right mood. So in that sense, even if we're very much attached to if we're very much attracted to the philosophy, we can, in that way, we can be studying the philosophy in the form of prayers, rather than just in the form of dry philosophy, which actually is described that makes the heart hard. But the Bhagavatam has so many prayers by very elevated persons praying prayers which contain very deep tattva understanding of the absolute truth, but at the same time they're in the mood of praying for mercy. So yeah, I think anyone who's very much into the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, then they can read those prayers and recite some of those prayers daily. I mean, Srila Prabhupada specifically recommended the Brahma Sanghita prayers to be recited daily, if not all of them, but at least some of them. So at least the prayers that we recite in the morning to the deities from the Brahma Sanghita, at least we should know the translations of those prayers, so that when we're reciting them, we're actually getting the benefit of, the benefit of the bhakti of Lord Brahma, who's our like the founder of the whole sampradaya. Ashish Prabhu.
There was an online question by Eamon, and whilst you were responding to Father's question, Eamon replied that no need to respond to his question. He says in Father's response itself, we got the answer to his question.
Okay.
But I'll still read on the question. Eamon's question was, Hare Krishna, it feels that when I'm not chanting, I'm easily distracted and likely to worldly thinking and behaving. How can I feel always saturated with love of Krishna? That was the question.
Okay, well, I'm glad that the question was answered. And so, yeah. Yeah. So the devotional service is a process, but it's also a mood, and it's an emotional exchange. And until we come to the higher stages of devotional service, then sometimes we may get caught a little bit in the process and neglect the mood. And at other times, perhaps we'll get a little kind of absorbed in the mood and neglect the process. So for that reason, we need teachers, and not just teachers, but we also should discuss these things amongst ourselves, and especially by learning nice verses and sharing our understanding of those verses with devotees, not just senior devotees, but devotees on our own level. This is described in the Nectar of Instruction. Srila Rupa Goswami says we should make friends with those devotees who are on like an equal level. Not necessarily, we may not consider them equal, but at least who are at the same stage of devotional service. We make friends and we can discuss Shastra between friends and share nice verses and realizations. Yes. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki.